Joining me now from Washington is Zeke Miller, White House correspondent for the Associated Press and CBSN political contributor. Zeke, a lot to get to. Let's start with the politics of this caravan and immigration. The president has tweeted quite a bit about this just minutes ago, writing criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in. He also said that on the White House lawn. He did not offer any evidence for this, but he did on the White House lawn today say, just go look for yourself. Talking to the media. We saw in Ouija's piece how many voters care about immigration when they head to the polls. Do we think the president's rhetoric is a winning position heading into Election Day?
Certainly the president thinks so. He's, in a way, been looking for an excuse to re-inject immigration into this midterm election campaign. A few months ago, he was debating whether or not to try to shut down the government over a border wall funding that he wants, that he's been pushing for several years now. And he thought that would be a winning political issue for Republicans this November. Republican leadership on Capitol Hill tell him that's a really, really bad idea. Please don't shut down the government over this. So he sort of tabled that for a couple of months. But then this caravan it's just started its march up towards the U.S. border a couple of weeks ago now, and that has essentially been a political gift for the president. This is something he's been looking for an excuse to talk about, to re-inject into the campaign, make a central issue for the campaign, because he believes it energizes his voters. That is a bet. That is not a certainty. Polling is somewhat mixed on this, because as many folks on the right that it animates and brings to the polls, it also animates Democrats on the left. The question is, will be from the president's standpoint, the Republicans have had this enthusiasm gap over the last several months. They believe that between the 1-2 punch of Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation and then now this caravan will keep Republicans energized going at the polls. Democrats sort of share that, but from the opposite perspective. So it really will be a test of which theory of the case will play out, and that's how we'll ultimately determine on November 6th who controls Congress. Will be sort of which side played this game, played their bets right.
Another possible benefit for the president: for the last 10 minutes, we haven't been speaking about Saudi Arabia, but we do so now. Monday, the president's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner spoke. We don't hear from him a lot, but he was asked about Jamal Khashoggi's death, and here's some of what he had to say.
With regards to the situation in Saudi Arabia, I'd say that right now, as an administration, we're more in the fact-finding phase, and we're obviously getting as many facts as we can from the different places. And then we'll determine which facts are credible. And then after that, the president and the secretary of state will make a determination as to what we deem to be credible and what actions we think we should take. I'll also say that we have to be able to work with our allies.
Kushner, of course, has a very close relationship with MBS, the Saudi crown prince. His comments, they are kind of continuing this pattern from the White House of not really wanting to take a stand, not wanting to come down hard on Saudi, even as so many other folks do. What are the next steps the Trump administration are going to have to take diplomatically on this?
Well, the Trump administration is going to have to do something. That much is pretty clear. Congress is going to force the president's hand on that. But what the president is trying to do, what Jared Kushner and others of the administration are trying to do, is contain the fallout of the apparent murder of this journalist in Turkey and the Saudi consulate there. We've seen the president sort of repeat the Saudi line over the last couple of days that this is a plot gone awry, and all through this process has been sort of essentially echoing the Saudi standpoint there, and that's reflective of, Saudi Arabia is a close ally of the United States, particularly this White House. They've used Saudi Arabia as sort of linchpin of their anti-Iran regional Middle East strategy. So they would like to contain the fallout, try to prevent the Khashoggi scandals, for lack of a really better term here. Now this is a full-blown political and geopolitical scandal for this White House and for Saudi Arabia, and keep that from infecting its other priorities in the region. So the president's going to have to do something. The president's talking about potentially some sort of actions on sanctions in the coming days, but he's been pretty adamant that he does not want to follow the path that America's European allies are taking in terms of curtailing arms sales to Saudi Arabia, saying that would unfairly hurt American businesses and American manufacturers who provide those arms to Saudi Arabia. So the question will be what can the president come up with, and will that be enough for the bipartisan group of lawmakers in Congress who want the president to take a stand, for a moral stand here against this sort of aggression by Saudi Arabia?
Do we know what Congress is ready to do if the administration doesn't do much or anything about Saudi?
Well, there is that arms sale package that would require has to go through a congressional process. That there could be enough votes. Depending on how this administration handles it, if they appear not to be taking the threat, this sort of action by Saudi Arabia's government seriously, that this could imperil that arms deal the president has been talking about for so many months and really the last year. At the same time, if the lawmakers say that there's this process called the Global Magnitsky Act, it's designed to be used against Russia, but it has been used in some other contexts as well. If that process provides a venue that allows them to take a more targeted look at sanctions.
That would freeze the assets of certain people.
Yes, exactly. And the question would be, which of those people would it be? It's highly unlikely they would ever rise to the level of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince. But maybe some people potentially in his orbit who are blamed, but who are already starting to be blamed by the Saudi government for what they claim is this rogue action that others seem to see evidence of Saudi government sanction, royal sanction behind it. So will that be enough for lawmakers on the Hill? Potentially, and that really will bear out over the next couple of days.
You mentioned Russia. They're in the news as well. The president threatening to pull out of a nuclear treaty with Russia because he says, and some independent experts agree, Russia has not been abiding by the treaty. John Bolton in Russia, in Moscow, saying that we're gonna look at this. Do we know where that stands?
The president's been pretty clear that he's going to be withdrawing from this treaty. He told that to us on the tarmac in Elko, Nevada on Saturday. The question is this going to be like the process when the president's talked about NAFTA for a year and change, saying he would pull out of NAFTA and then try to renegotiate a better agreement or not? This treaty, the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, was central to sort of bringing down Cold War tensions in the late 1980s. Experts suggest that if that were to erode, it could sort of begin to chip away at the broader nuclear anti-proliferation regime of treaties. But from the president's perspective, the White House perspective, this has been a long-term issue for the United States. Its foreign policy under multiple administrations. Russia's apparent violation of this treaty over the years. And number one, number two, the fact that it was just a bilateral treaty, it was not a global treaty, and that China has made some strides in developing those sorts of references as well. The president on the South Lawn today did say that he would like to see some sort of renegotiation here that would maybe bring China into the fold. The question is there enough? Does the president have enough leverage here to try to do that, or does he just want to cancel this treaty? That remains to be seen. Is this a negotiating ploy, and does he have actually a muscle behind it, a strategy behind it to get to a new agreement, or is it just sort of a symbolic step that he's going to take and maybe actually pull the United States out of this treaty? One
of the most consistent lines of attack against the president has been that he's too cozy with Russia. Do we think there's a political dimension to this case of being tough with Russia 2 weeks before the midterms?
There's certainly the timing of this is no coincidence. Everything in Washington has some political consideration to it, and this is an example of the president taking a very public, critical stance of Russia just 2 weeks before the midterm elections. It's also is somewhat disconnected from that as well, that there's been this ongoing dialogue between John Bolton, the national security advisor, and his Russian counterpart and his Russian officials. So there is some coincidence here, and there's some strategy, and it's sort of a little bit. It depends on the eye of the beholder. Just how calculating is this can this White House possibly be? John Bolton's been has had some of these meetings on a semi-regular basis with his Russian counterpart. So it's maybe a little bit of both, but it leans a little more on the coincidence side when you look back at sort of the broader state of that bilateral relationship.
Sticking with midterms for a minute. What do we know about fundraising, and what, if anything, does it tell us about the last couple weeks until Election Day?
Well, we know that Democrats have a massive advantage when it comes to sort of bringing in dollars, and they've been spending a whole lot of it, too. Republicans have a lot of money, cash on hand. We're seeing this air war play out, but like we've seen in previous elections, certainly saw this in 2016, money doesn't mean everything. It's the strength of candidates and the strength of and its enthusiasm. Republicans have pointed to a lot of small dollar money coming in the last couple of weeks as a sign that they've narrowed that enthusiasm gap, like we were talking about before, over Kavanaugh and then immigration. Democrats have been saying that they've seen similar upticks around sort of big, high-profile news events.
Do we know why the Republicans are holding on to the money? Why haven't they spent it like the Democrats have?
In some cases, we have the president's re-election campaign where he's spending some of it, but not all of it there. But then he's been fundraising for himself. In other instances, I mean, they are starting to spend it in the last several weeks on the way out the door. It really is, it goes to two different strategies in the way they campaign. Democrats often like to drop ads a lot earlier in the cycle. Republicans often wait towards the end. Just different styles of campaigning we've seen play out cycle by cycle.
And finally, it may come from the when pigs fly category, but the president is campaigning for Ted Cruz tonight.
Yeah.
If 2 years ago you would have heard that sentence, you would have thought I was lying, Brooke Silva Braga. How much can the president help Ted Cruz in this race?
He can certainly help him a lot. Ted Cruz is not the most popular figure in Texas, so you see this for politicians over and again when they they hold statewide office and they try to make a run for national office, running for president. There is some downside to their reputations at home. You saw that with Joe Lieberman in Connecticut, and when he lost his primary in 2006. We're seeing it right now with Scott Walker in Wisconsin, and now with Ted Cruz as well. That he does have some problems with his base. There were a lot of as well as with the center. He's not he was always sort of an unpopular figure among Democrats and even a lot of independents. So the president can sort of boost Republican intensity, Republican turnout in the closing days of the election, and sort of drive a whole bunch of money down to that race as well, which is something that Ted Cruz needs. He's being badly outraised by his Democratic opponent. In a state like Texas, where it's massive, there are a ton of media markets. All that money can go a really long way. That said, that race, Ted Cruz seems to be in a lot better position today than he was, than it looked like he was a month ago. In part because of that intensity gap between Democrats and Republicans is closing. So from the Cruz campaign perspective, from the White House perspective, they view this as a way to really put Ted Cruz over the top and bring that race to a close. That is, if the polls and all the models are correct and their calculations are correct. Democrats still think that there's a very small outside chance that they can do very well down there, but that would sort of require a whole bunch of things going the right way for them.
Okay, Zeke Miller, thanks so much.